Welcome to Full History Documentary. For over 6 centuries, one colossal power dominated the Mediterranean, connecting and conquering 3 continents. This Ottoman Empire Full History Documentary explores the incredible rise from a small Turkish tribe to a global superpower and the slow, dramatic collapse that followed. From the conquest of Constantinople to its final dissolution, we reveal the Sultans, the Janissaries, and the lasting legacy that changed the world. If you want the complete, unbiased truth of the Ottoman Empire, this is the film for you.
Full History Documentary.
For more than 6 centuries, the Ottoman Empire stood as one of the most powerful, enduring, and influential empires in all of human history. Known also as the Turkish Empire, its might stretched across 3 continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, ruling over millions, shaping trade routes, cultures, and the destiny of nations. It was a civilization forged in both the sword and the spirit, and its story begins not in glory, but in the rugged frontier lands of northwestern Anatolia around the dawn of the 14th century. In its earliest days, the Ottoman state was little more than a small principality, a beylik surrounded by powerful and often hostile neighbors. Yet, within just a century, it would rise from obscurity to become a regional superpower. This transformation was no accident. The Ottomans were not only skilled warriors, but strategic opportunists, adept at exploiting the weaknesses of those around them, especially the fractured Christian kingdoms of the Balkans and the crumbling Byzantine Empire. The origins of this formidable empire trace back to the year 1299, when a charismatic and determined leader named Osman I declared his independence from the declining Seljuk Sultanate of Rum. Osman, a Muslim chief from the rugged town of Sode in northwestern Anatolia, began leading daring raids against Byzantine outposts. His loyal warriors, known as Ghazis, or holy warriors, fought not merely for land or plunder, but for faith and destiny. From Osman's name, pronounced Uthman in Arabic, the empire would take its enduring title, the Ottoman Empire. Little is known about Osman's life with certainty. He left behind no written records, no monuments of his own, making only legends. Much of what we know about him today comes from stories recorded centuries after his death, blending truth with myth. According to Ottoman tradition, Osman was the son of Ertuğrul and the grandson of Suleiman Shah, members of the Kayu tribe of the Oghuz Turks, a lineage proudly claimed by later Ottoman rulers, though many historians debate the accuracy of this genealogy. Regardless of the myths, one fact remains clear. Osman I laid the foundation of what would become one of history's most remarkable empires. As the Seljuk dynasty collapsed in Iran and Mesopotamia around 1293, Osman seized his moment. With the old powers disintegrating, he began pushing his frontiers deeper into Byzantine territory. His ambitions were not limited to raiding. Osman envisioned a new, lasting Muslim state. By the early 1300s, his forces advanced along the Sakarya River, reaching the Sea of Marmara. However, despite their boldness, the Ottomans faced one significant obstacle: their lack of siege technology. Massive Byzantine fortresses like Constantinople stood unconquered, for Osman's army was still young, its resources limited, its ambitions far ahead of its means. It was not until 1326, under the leadership of Osman's son Orhan, that the Ottomans achieved their first great victory, the capture of Bursa. This city, nestled in northwestern Anatolia, became the first true capital of the Ottoman realm. Its fall marked a turning point from tribal raids to organized statehood. Not long after this triumph, Osman I passed away, leaving behind both a fledgling empire and a legacy that would echo for centuries. His tomb still stands in Bursa, a silent witness to the birth of an empire. With Orhan now the second sultan, the empire entered a period of consolidation and transformation. Realizing that the survival of his state depended on discipline and structure, Orhan turned to his brother Alaeddin Pasha for counsel. Together, they reorganized the Ottoman administration and established one of Europe's first paid professional armies, replacing the old system of volunteer tribal warriors who gathered only for short campaigns. But Orhan wanted more: a truly loyal elite force that would owe allegiance solely to the Sultan. For this, he sought the advice of Chandarla Kara Halil, a brilliant statesman. From their collaboration emerged a revolutionary concept, an army composed not of Turkish nobles, but of Christian youths taken from conquered lands, converted to Islam, and trained from childhood in military discipline and devotion. These soldiers would come to be known as the Janissaries, the Sultans' elite infantry, famed for their unmatched loyalty, iron discipline, and strict obedience. Forbidden to marry, detached from family ties, they became the embodiment of the Sultan's will. Though this system would fully mature under later rulers like Murad I, its roots were planted under Orhan's reign. With his army strengthened, Orhan continued his father's mission of expansion. In 1331, the Ottomans captured Nicaea, Iznik, followed by Nicomedia, Izmit, in 1337, and Üsküdar across the Bosporus by 1338. Each conquest brought them closer to the gates of Europe and closer to the city that would one day become the jewel of their empire. Constantinople. From a small frontier beylik in the wild hills of Anatolia, the Ottomans had become a force that could no longer be ignored. Their rise was only beginning, and soon the world would learn to fear the crescent and star of the Ottoman banner. Only 7 years after Orhan's latest conquests, the growing Ottoman state expanded once again. Around 1340, Orhan managed to occupy the neighboring principality of Karasi, a small but strategically vital region in northwestern Anatolia. The acquisition of Karasi was more than just a military victory. It gave the Ottomans direct access to the Aegean coast and a stronger foothold for further campaigns into Europe. Around this same period, Orhan entered into a significant alliance with John VI Kantakouzenos, who would later become Emperor of Byzantium. This union, though political in nature, reflected the complex diplomacy of the age. The Byzantines, weakened and desperate for stability amid internal fight, sought Ottoman assistance to secure their throne. Orhan saw this as an opportunity not only for military advantage, but also for prestige and expansion. As part of their alliance, Orhan was granted the right to raid the rich lands of Thrace, a long-desired goal of the Ottomans. To seal their partnership, Orhan married Theodora, the daughter of Emperor Kantakouzenos. This marriage connected the young Turkish Sultanate to one of the oldest imperial dynasties of Europe, a symbolic victory for Orhan's growing empire. Under the command of Suleiman Pasha, one of Orhan's sons, Ottoman forces made their first permanent foothold in Europe. In 1354, they seized control of Gallipoli, a peninsula of immense strategic value that would serve as the gateway into the Balkans. The Byzantines, alarmed by this sudden expansion, urged Orhan to withdraw, but he refused. He claimed that this land had been gifted to him by Allah, and thus it could not be surrendered. The seizure of Gallipoli brought great wealth and treasures to the Ottoman army, attracting waves of Turkish warriors and settlers from Anatolia who wished to join the cause. Thousands of families migrated to these newly conquered lands, helping to cement Ottoman rule across the Dardanelles. The refusal to return Gallipoli, however, deeply embarrassed the Byzantine emperor and triggered political turmoil within his already fragile empire, an upheaval that would contribute to Byzantium's continued decline. By 1362, the reign of Sultan Orhan came to an end. He was nearly 80 years old at the time of his death. His passing was said to have been hastened by grief over the loss of one of his sons who had died years earlier in a tragic hunting accident. Orhan left behind not only a stronger state than he had inherited, but also a vision that his successors would expand upon for generations. After his death, Murad I, another of Orhan's sons, ascended the throne as the empire's third sultan. Murad's rule marked the beginning of a new, more ambitious phase of Ottoman expansion into the Balkans. Determined to assert dominance over southeastern Europe, Murad launched a series of campaigns that redefined the political landscape of the region. In 1382, Murad pressured the Bulgarian ruler Ivan Shishman to accept Ottoman suzerainty. Bulgaria became a vassal state, forced to acknowledge the Sultan's authority while retaining its local ruler. This new policy, allowing native princes to rule under Ottoman overlordship, became a cornerstone of Murad's European strategy. These vassal rulers were required to supply troops to the Ottoman army and pay regular tribute, ensuring that the empire grew without overstretching its administration. Yet, despite such arrangements, Murad continued his military advance. His armies moved relentlessly across the Balkans, capturing key cities such as Sofia, Pirot, and Niš. These victories opened the road to Serbia and set the stage for one of the most famous confrontations in Ottoman history. In 1389, the Ottoman and Serbian forces met at the Battle of Kosovo, a fierce and bloody conflict that would become legendary in Balkan history. Both sides suffered devastating losses, and both leaders, Sultan Murad I and the Serbian prince Lazar Frabeljanović, were killed during the battle. Though the Ottomans lost many men, their reserves and reinforcements ensured victory. The Serbian state, shattered and leaderless, fell under Ottoman control. The victory at Kosovo established Ottoman dominance across much of the Balkans. After Murad's death, his son Bayezid I, known as Yildirim, meaning the Thunderbolt, ascended the throne. Bayezid was a commander of remarkable speed and decisiveness, and under him the empire continued to grow in power and ambition. However, Bayezid's early years as sultan were filled with challenges. He had to return quickly to Anatolia to restore order and reassert control over rebellious territories after the costly Balkan campaigns. A growing threat loomed from the Principality of Karaman, a powerful Turkish state that had risen from the remnants of the old Seljuk Sultanate. Murad had tried to manage the Karamanids diplomatically, but Bayezid faced a more immediate danger. The Karamanid rulers began encroaching upon Ottoman lands, capturing regions such as Gurmian and Hamid, threatening the fragile unity of Anatolia. To prevent internal rebellion and maintain the loyalty of his Turkish subjects, Bayezid first made peace with Karaman. But once he stabilized his rule, he turned his attention back toward the Balkans. In a matter of years, he subdued Bulgaria entirely, and then set his eyes on the ultimate prize, the city of Constantinople. Bayezid laid siege to the Byzantine capital, determined to accomplish what his forefathers could not. In response, the Christian powers of Europe organized a grand crusade to halt the Ottoman advance. This culminated in the Battle of Nicopolis in 1396, where an army of Hungarians, Germans, French knights, and other European allies faced the Ottomans. The Crusaders, overconfident and divided, were crushed by Bayezid's disciplined forces. The victory at Nicopolis was one of the greatest triumphs of the Ottoman army and demonstrated to all of Europe the might of this rising empire. Thousands of prisoners were captured, and the defeat of the Crusaders sent shockwaves across Christendom. Buoyed by his success, Bayezid turned back to Anatolia the following year. In 1397, he invaded and annexed the Principality of Karaman, violating his earlier peace treaty and uniting much of Asia Minor under his control. By the end of the 14th century, Bayezid's empire spanned vast territories from the Danube in the north to the Taurus Mountains in the south, from the Aegean Sea to the borders of Persia. The Ottoman Sultan had become one of the most powerful Muslim rulers in the world, and his empire now stood as a formidable force between East and West. Bayezid's ambitions were clear. His goal mirrored that of his predecessors, and would become the guiding principle of his successors: to expand the empire at all costs. Under his leadership, the Ottoman state grew with unprecedented speed, absorbing neighboring principalities, fortifying its armies, and asserting dominance across 2 continents. Though historical sources from the empire's earliest century are scarce, what little we do know reveals a period of constant momentum. From the year 1300 to 1400, the Ottomans transformed from a small border tribe into a dynamic imperial power. It was during these formative years that the principles of Ottoman rule were forged: military organization, administrative discipline, religious legitimacy, and a vision of unity under the Sultan's authority. This first century served as the springboard for all that the empire would later become. The systems established by Osman, Orhan, Murad, and Bayezid created the foundations of a political and military machine unlike any other in the medieval world. Through faith, ambition, and a tireless drive for conquest, the Ottomans had carved out a realm that straddled both East and West, Islam and Christendom, tradition and innovation. As the 15th century dawned, the empire stood on the edge of even greater expansion, but also on the brink of crisis. These were the final years of Sultan Bayezid I, a ruler whose reign had brought the Ottomans both immense glory and unforeseen peril. By the year 1400, the Ottoman Empire found itself facing a new and formidable threat: the Turkic-Mongol conqueror Timur, also known in the West as Tamerlane. Timur had built a vast empire stretching from Central Asia into Persia, and his ambitions soon brought him into direct conflict with Sultan Bayezid I. For years, tensions between the two powers simmered beneath the surface. Timur viewed Bayezid's rapid expansion across Anatolia as a challenge to his own authority, while Bayezid regarded Timur as an obstacle to his growing influence in the east. What began as a political rivalry soon escalated into open hostility, culminating in the year 1402 with one of the most devastating clashes in Ottoman history, the Battle of Ankara. Dehydrated and surrounded, Bayezid's troops were forced into fight under desperate conditions. The encounter was not imaginable. By the end of the day, the Ottoman army lay shattered, and Timur's forces stood victorious. Bayezid attempted to flee with his sons, but their escape failed. He and two of his sons, Musa and Mustafa Celebi, were captured, while others managed to escape. Musa was released a year later in 1403, but Mustafa was taken east to Samarkand, where he remained a captive until Timur's death in 1405, after which he vanished into hiding among the Sultan's allies. As for Bayezid, his fate became the subject of much debate and legend. Some accounts claim Timur treated him with a degree of respect, while others describe humiliation and mistreatment. Whatever the truth, Bayezid I died shortly after his capture, marking the tragic end of the fourth Ottoman Sultan's reign. His sudden fall plunged the empire into disarray and chaos. With the Sultan dead and no clear successor, the Ottoman realm fractured. The surviving sons of Bayezid turned against one another in a fierce and prolonged struggle for the throne, a 10-year conflict known as the Ottoman Interregnum. Before his death, Timur had recognized Mehmed Celebi as the legitimate ruler of the Ottomans. However, Bayezid's other sons, Isa, Musa, and Suleiman, rejected this decision. Each declared himself the rightful sultan, sparking a bitter fight that tore the empire apart. Suleiman established his rule in Edirne, Adrianople, extending his influence across Thrace and the Balkans, reaching as far south as northern Greece. Mehmed held his base in Amasya, deep within Anatolia. Meanwhile, Isa and Musa battled for control over Bursa, the symbolic heart of the Ottoman state. After several bloody engagements, Isa emerged victorious in Bursa, only to face renewed opposition from Mehmed. Defeated multiple times, Isa fled to Constantinople, seeking refuge with the Byzantine emperor. Mehmed seized Bursa and consolidated his control, but soon the conflict reignited. At Karasi, Mehmed's forces defeated Isa once more, forcing him to flee toward Karaman. There, Isa's fortunes ran out. He was reportedly discovered and executed while bathing an order said to have come from Mehmed himself. Suleiman, who had supported Isa in his earlier struggles, now turned his attention to his surviving brothers. He successfully captured both Bursa and Ankara, positioning himself as the most powerful claimant to the Ottoman throne. For a time, an uneasy alliance formed between Mehmed and Musa. Musa was sent across the Black Sea to rule over the empire's European territories as co-sultan. Suleiman, meanwhile, strengthened his alliances with Manuel II Palaiologos, the Byzantine emperor, and even gained the support of the Serbian nobility. In 1410, at the Battle of Kosmedon near Constantinople, Suleiman defeated Musa, but his victory would prove short-lived. Suleiman's erratic temperament and growing arrogance alienated many of his allies. Discontent spread through his army, and defections weakened his position. Sensing opportunity, Musa struck back. In 1411, his forces triumphed at Edirne, forcing Suleiman to flee toward Byzantine protection. Before he could reach safety, he was betrayed and killed, ending his claim to the throne. Now only Musa and Mehmed Celebi remained. Initially ruling as co-sultans, their alliance quickly broke down. Enraged by the Byzantine emperor's earlier support for Suleiman, Musa besieged Constantinople, hoping to punish the empire that had interfered so often in Ottoman affairs. Emperor Manuel appealed to Mehmed for help, and despite their recent rivalry, Mehmed responded. Though this violated his previous agreements with Musa, Mehmed understood that the unity of the empire depended on stopping his brother. Before he could face Musa, however, Mehmed was forced to suppress a mutiny within his own ranks. Once stability was restored, he secured aid from Stefan Lazarevic, the Serbian ruler, and marched to confront Musa. The decisive confrontation came at Samurlu in 1413. Mehmed's army defeated Musa's forces after a fierce and exhausting battle. Musa was captured and executed soon after, bringing an end to the Ottoman fight. After a decade of bloodshed, betrayal, and uncertainty, Mehmed Celebi emerged as the sole ruler of the empire. He would be remembered as Mehmed I, the fifth Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, and the man who restored unity to a realm that had nearly torn itself apart. With the civil war finally behind him and the threat of his brothers extinguished, Mehmed Çelebi emerged as the undisputed ruler of the Ottoman realm. Now known as Sultan Mehmed I, he accepted full sovereignty over a state that had been fractured and divided for over a decade. His reign marked the long-awaited reunification of the empire and the restoration of central authority after years of chaos. Throughout the rest of his rule, Mehmed focused on consolidating Ottoman power across Anatolia and the Balkans, restoring the stability that the Interregnum had nearly destroyed. His governance faced continuous challenges, both political and religious. One of the first came from Mustafa Çelebi, his surviving brother who had been in hiding since the Wars of Succession. Mustafa resurfaced to stake his claim to the throne, but Mehmed swiftly moved to neutralize the threat and preserve his control. An even greater internal danger came from Sheikh Bedreddin, a theologian, jurist, and revolutionary thinker who questioned Ottoman authority and inspired a populist movement among the discontented. His call for social and religious reform sparked rebellion in several provinces, lasting nearly 4 years. Mehmed's forces eventually captured Bedreddin, and in a decisive act to restore order, the rebel leader was executed by hanging. Despite these upheavals, Mehmed I successfully restored the Ottoman Empire's administrative systems and military discipline. His reign re-established the strength and legitimacy of the Sultanate, setting the stage for renewed expansion. In 1421, after a reign marked by both turmoil and triumph, Sultan Mehmed I died, passing the throne to his son Murad II. Murad's early rule began amid new conspiracies and betrayals. The Byzantine Emperor Manuel II Palaiologos, seeking to weaken the newly crowned sultan, released Mustafa Çelebi from exile and recognized him as the rightful heir to Bayezid I's legacy. Mustafa's return briefly ignited fresh unrest as he gathered followers and attempted to reclaim the Ottoman throne. But his rebellion was short-lived. Murad defeated and executed him, putting an end to the pretender's ambitions. Angered by Byzantine interference, Murad turned his attention toward Constantinople, determined to punish the empire for its deceit. He began preparations for a siege, but his campaign was interrupted when his younger brother, only 13 years old, rebelled under Byzantine encouragement. Murad was forced to abandon his assault and march back to Bursa, where he crushed the revolt and reasserted control. Once internal threats were subdued, Murad redirected his focus towards strengthening his dominion. He re-established Ottoman authority over the Anatolian principalities and intensified the empire's push into southeastern Europe. Conflicts with Venice, Serbia, and Hungary became frequent as the Ottomans clashed with Christian powers attempting to contain their influence. By the 1442, the stage was set for another grand confrontation between Islam and Christendom. In 1444, a large Christian coalition led by John Hunyadi of Hungary launched a crusade aimed at expelling the Ottomans from Europe. The two sides met at the Battle of Varna, where Murad's forces decisively crushed the Crusaders in a victory that shook the kingdoms of Europe. The defeat turned into a humiliating retreat for the Christian army, demonstrating once again the Ottoman Empire's military supremacy. A notable figure involved indirectly in this battle was Vlad Dracul, the ruler of Wallachia. Though his two youngest sons were held as hostages by Murad to secure his loyalty, Dracul nonetheless sent troops to support the Crusaders. This act of betrayal would not be forgotten, foreshadowing future tensions between the Ottomans and the region that would later produce Vlad the Impaler, or Vlad Dracula. Interestingly, before the Battle of Varna, Murad had abdicated his throne to his young son Mehmed II, hoping to retire from leadership. However, the Christian powers saw the boy's ascension as an opportunity to attack. The young Mehmed, realizing the dire situation, pleaded with his father to return and lead the army. Murad heeded the call, reclaimed command, and led the Ottomans to their triumph at Varna. Following the victory, Murad once again withdrew from political life, allowing his son to rule. Yet peace was short-lived. A revolt among the Janissaries, the elite Ottoman infantry, forced the aging sultan to return to the throne once more. His return was necessary not only to restore discipline, but also to repel another wave of Christian resistance. In 1448, at the Second Battle of Kosovo, Murad faced John Hunyadi again, this time commanding a massive alliance of Hungarians, Wallachians, Moldavians, and other Balkan forces determined to avenge their defeat at Varna. But history repeated itself. Murad's disciplined armies intercepted the Crusaders and crushed them in another decisive Ottoman victory. The fields of Kosovo once again witnessed the end of a Christian crusade and the reaffirmation of Ottoman dominance in the Balkans. After securing his European frontiers, Murad turned his attention eastward. He confronted Shahrukh, the son of the late Timur, and worked to assert Ottoman authority in eastern Anatolia and the regions around Çorum and Amasya. Though his campaigns were largely successful, Murad failed in one of his final military efforts, an attempt to defeat the Albanian hero Skanderbeg, who had led a powerful resistance at the castle of Kruje. By 1451, Sultan Murad II had fallen gravely ill. His death that year brought an end to a reign defined by both war and restoration. His son Mehmed II once again ascended the throne, no longer a child, but a determined and visionary ruler. Mehmed II, later celebrated as Mehmed the Conqueror, immediately set his sights on achieving what generations of Ottoman rulers had dreamed of: the conquest of Constantinople, the greatest prize of them all. By 1451, Sultan Murad II had fallen gravely ill. His death that year brought an end to a reign defined by both war and restoration. His son Mehmed II once again ascended the throne, no longer a child, but a determined and visionary ruler. Mehmed II, later celebrated as Mehmed the Conqueror, immediately set his sights on achieving what generations of Ottoman rulers had dreamed of: the conquest of Constantinople, the greatest prize of them all. In a deliberate strategy to eliminate any distractions before undertaking the greatest campaign of his reign, Mehmed II sought peace with his most immediate rivals. He signed treaties with both Hungary and Venice, securing his European frontiers and ensuring that no hostile power could threaten him while he prepared for the long-awaited siege of Byzantium's heart, Constantinople. By the spring of 1453, Mehmed had assembled an enormous army, estimated at more than 80,000 troops, supported by over 100 naval ships, and equipped with a weapon never before seen in Ottoman campaigns: massive cannons designed to shatter the legendary walls of the Byzantine capital. With meticulous preparation and unshakable determination, he launched the offensive that would forever be remembered as the fall of Constantinople. The siege lasted just over 50 days, a brutal and relentless confrontation between the ancient defenders of Byzantium and the rising power of the Ottomans. On the 29th of May 1453, after weeks of continuous bombardment and countless assaults, the city fell. Mehmed entered Constantinople triumphantly, fulfilling a dream that had eluded his predecessors for centuries. The once great Byzantine capital now became the new Ottoman imperial center, renamed Istanbul. Following his victory, Mehmed proclaimed himself Kaiser-i-Rum, Caesar of the Roman Empire. While the title was rejected by the Roman Catholic Church, it was acknowledged by the Eastern Orthodox Church, signifying the Ottoman Empire's rightful inheritance of Rome's Eastern legacy. The young sultan then moved swiftly to consolidate his new dominion. He captured the last remaining Byzantine territories and expanded further into the Balkans and Central Europe, solidifying Ottoman dominance. Under his rule, the empire underwent dramatic transformation. Mehmed restructured the government into a centralized bureaucracy, appointing only the most capable and loyal officials to serve his vision. His court became a center of learning, law, and administration, an empire governed by merit and intellect rather than lineage alone. Among the many episodes that defined Mehmed's reign, one of the most fascinating is his complex relationship with Vlad III Dracula of Wallachia. Decades earlier, during the reign of Murad II, Vlad and his younger brother Radu had been held as hostages in the Ottoman court. The two princes grew up within the empire, under Ottoman tutors and alongside Mehmed himself. As they matured, their paths diverged sharply. Radu embraced Ottoman culture, remained loyal to Mehmed, and later served him faithfully. Vlad, however, returned to his homeland filled with bitterness and a burning desire for independence. Known to history as Vlad the Impaler, he would become one of Mehmed's most troublesome adversaries. For years, their rivalry defined the uneasy borderlands between the Ottoman Empire and Wallachia. While some chroniclers viewed Mehmed's failure to completely subdue Vlad as a weakness, it in fact revealed the Sultan's strategic patience and his respect for formidable opponents. Mehmed is said to have remarked that it is not fitting to seize the land of a man who performs such marvelous deeds. Surely such a man is destined for greatness. These words demonstrate not only the Sultan's admiration for bravery, but also his confidence in the sheer strength of his empire. Mehmed understood that the Ottoman realm was now more than just a kingdom. it was a vast civilization, heir to both Islamic and Roman legacies. With the Byzantine Empire effectively absorbed, he ruled over a dominion that spanned two worlds, east and west, united under his command. This spirit of tolerance and pragmatism extended beyond Mehmed's reign. Upon his death in 1481, he was succeeded by his son Bayezid II, who continued many of his father's policies but with a greater focus on domestic stability and humanitarian governance. Bayezid's early years as sultan were marred by a brief conflict with his brother Sem Sultan, who challenged his legitimacy. Once Bayezid secured his position, he turned to internal reform, strengthening the administrative systems and emphasizing order and justice throughout both the eastern and western provinces of the empire. Unlike his father, Bayezid was not primarily remembered for his conquests, though he did wage successful campaigns against Venetian strongholds and expanded Ottoman influence further into the Balkans. His true legacy, however, lay in his compassion and wisdom as a ruler. One of the most remarkable moments of his reign came in 1492, when the Catholic monarchs Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile expelled both Muslims and Jews from Spain following the completion of the Reconquista. While much of Europe applauded the act, Bayezid saw it as both a moral and strategic error. He condemned the Spanish rulers for their cruelty and ordered the Ottoman navy to transport the displaced refugees to safety within his empire. Bayezid instructed every governor under his command to welcome the arriving exiles with dignity and warned that any mistreatment of them, whether Muslim or Jew, would be punished by death. This decree not only saved tens of thousands of lives, but also enriched the Ottoman realm immeasurably. The new settlers brought with them advanced skills, knowledge of trade, finance, medicine, and craftsmanship, invigorating the empire's cultural and economic life. By the close of the 15th century, Sultan Bayezid II had earned the epithet the Just. Though often overshadowed by his more famous predecessors, his reign ensured lasting stability and prosperity. He embodied a gentler, more reflective side of Ottoman leadership, one that valued justice, faith, and intellect as the true pillars of imperial power. Just like the great rulers who came before him, Bayezid II achieved significant feats that helped propel the Ottoman Empire into new heights of strength and prosperity achievements that would shape its destiny for generations to come. As the 16th century dawned, Bayezid was already locked in a fierce naval war against the Venetians, a conflict that would stretch into the early 1500s. Determined to secure Ottoman dominance over the seas, he poured his efforts into consolidating control along the Mediterranean trade routes. Under the brilliant command of Admiral Kemal Reis, the Ottoman navy scored decisive victories, bringing the Turkish-Venetian War to an end in 1503. The Venetians were forced once again to agree to peace on Ottoman terms, a triumph that reinforced Ottoman authority in Europe and further expanded its influence across the Mediterranean. While the empire's power surged abroad, the internal situation in Anatolia was becoming increasingly unstable. In 1511, supporters of the rising Safavid dynasty of Persia, loyal to Shah Ismail, staged a rebellion against Ottoman rule. The revolt, known as the Shakulu Rebellion, was eventually crushed, but it revealed deep fractures within the empire's eastern provinces. At the same time, a far more dangerous conflict brewed within the royal court itself, a bitter rivalry between Bayezid's sons Selim and Ahmed. Each sought the loyalty of the Janissaries and provincial governors, each maneuvering to claim the throne. The Sultan's advisors and the elite Janissary corps increasingly favored Selim, viewing him as the stronger and more decisive candidate. Bayezid, fearing Ahmed's potential alliance with the Safavids, finally chose to abdicate the throne in 1,512 inches Selim's favor. Only a month after his retirement, Bayezid II passed away, marking the end of an era of stability and the beginning of one of the empire's most dramatic expansions. Upon ascending the throne, Sultan Selim I, later known as Selim the Grim, moved swiftly and ruthlessly to eliminate all rivals to his rule. In the first months of his reign, he ordered the execution of his brothers and their sons, a brutal but effective act that ensured no challenge would rise from within his own family. With internal threats eradicated, Selim turned his attention to the external dangers facing his empire. His most formidable adversary was Shah Ismail I, the powerful and charismatic ruler of the Safavid Empire in Persia. The Safavids, bound by religious zeal and backed by the fierce Kizilbash Turkoman warriors, sought to spread Shia Islam throughout Anatolia, directly threatening the Sunni Ottoman state. In 1514, the two empires met at the Battle of Chaldiran, a clash that would determine the fate of the Middle East. Though the Safavid cavalry fought valiantly, Selim's disciplined army, over 100,000 strong, wielded muskets and heavy artillery, weapons that gave the Ottomans an overwhelming technological advantage. The Safavid forces were crushed, their capital Tabriz seized, and their expansion into Anatolia permanently halted. But Selim's ambitions did not end there. With Persia subdued, he turned his gaze southward toward the ancient and powerful Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt. In a campaign that would redefine the Islamic world, Selim's armies defeated the Mamluks first at the Battle of Marjabik in 1516, and again at the Battle of Ridania in 1517. With these victories, the Ottoman Empire absorbed Syria, Egypt, the Hejaz, and the Levant, bringing the holy cities of Mecca and Medina under Ottoman protection. Selim's triumph not only shifted the empire's cultural and geographic center, but also elevated its spiritual authority. By his death in 1520, the empire had grown by nearly 70%, and Selim had become the undisputed leader of the Islamic world, caliph of all Muslims. Following Selim's death, his only son, Suleiman I, ascended to the throne. Known to history in the West as Suleiman the Magnificent, and to his own people as Kanuni the Lawgiver, he ushered in what would later be remembered as the Golden Age of the Ottoman Empire. Suleiman's reign brought not only military glory, but also sweeping legal and cultural reforms. While Sharia, or sacred Islamic law, remained untouched, Suleiman restructured the Qanun, the body of secular law governing land, crime, and taxation. His comprehensive reforms, known as the Ottoman laws, would endure for the next 3 centuries, shaping governance across the empire. Under his leadership, justice was tempered with tolerance. Like his grandfather Bayezid II, Suleiman condemned blood libel accusations and other injustices against the Jewish population, fostering an atmosphere of coexistence among Muslims, Christians, and Jews within Ottoman lands. As Suleiman strengthened his empire from within, he simultaneously expanded it abroad with relentless determination. In 1521, he captured Belgrade, shattering one of Europe's most formidable defenses. The following year, he conquered the island stronghold of Rhodes, expelling the Knights Hospitaller after a grueling siege. 4 years later, in 1526, the Ottoman armies clashed with the forces of Hungary at the Battle of Mohacs. The Hungarian army was utterly destroyed, and King Louis II of Hungary was killed on the battlefield. With this victory, the Ottomans gained control of Hungary and extended their power deep into the heart of Europe. When Suleiman the Magnificent encountered the slain body of King Louis II of Hungary on the battlefield of Mohacs, he is recorded to have reflected with both solemnity and mercy. May Allah be merciful to him and punish those who misled his inexperience. I came indeed in arms against him, but it was not my wish that he should be thus cut off before he scarcely tasted the sweets of life and royalty. This tragic and unforeseen void in Hungarian leadership immediately sparked a new struggle for the throne. The conflict pitted the Habsburg Archduke of Austria against the Voivode of Transylvania, each vying to assert control over the fractured Hungarian lands. Recognizing the strategic importance of stability along his European frontier, Suleiman chose to accept John Zapolya as the new vassal king of Hungary, thereby consolidating Ottoman influence while undermining Habsburg ambitions. Determined to prevent further European interference, Suleiman embarked on another ambitious campaign in 1529, this time marching on Vienna, the symbolic gateway to Central Europe. Yet, despite meticulous planning and the might of his forces, the offensive faltered due to unforeseen difficulties, forcing the Sultan to abandon the siege. Undeterred, by 1532, the Ottomans renewed their campaign against Vienna. They advanced through Habsburg territory but were again halted, this time at the Siege of Gunz, demonstrating to Suleiman that Vienna would not yield easily to military might alone. A formal peace agreement was signed in Constantinople between Archduke Ferdinand I and Suleiman the following year, stabilizing the region temporarily. However, peace proved fragile. When John Zapolya passed away in 1540, hostilities resumed almost immediately. Between 1541 and 1543, the Ottomans reshaped Hungary, splitting it into 3 distinct regions. Habsburg controlled Hungary, the Ottoman vassal state of Transylvania, and directly garrisoned Ottoman Hungary. For nearly 2 decades, these territories became the stage for intermittent warfare, punctuated by periodic negotiations and uneasy truces. Meanwhile, the Ottomans were not solely focused on Europe. In 1534, Suleiman launched the first of a series of campaigns against Persia. engaging in a prolonged struggle with Shah Tahmasp I and the Safavid forces. This back-and-forth contest over borderlands continued until 1544, when a final treaty secured significant territorial gains for the Ottomans, consolidating their eastern frontiers. During this period, Ottoman naval power expanded dramatically under the leadership of Admiral Hayreddin Barbarossa. Ottoman fleets achieved decisive victories against European allies along the Greek coastline and exerted influence across the Mediterranean. Their reach extended even as far as the Indian Ocean, where they increasingly challenged Portuguese dominance in the spice trade. Suleiman also projected Ottoman power into North Africa and maintained strategic interactions with the Mughal Empire, demonstrating the global scope of his rule. His reign, though marked by extraordinary success, was not without immense sacrifice. In his final campaign at the siege of Sigetvar in 1566, the Sultan faced fierce resistance from a relatively small Hungarian garrison. The battle exacted a heavy toll. Tens of thousands of Ottoman soldiers were lost, and Suleiman himself died amidst the campaign. With his death, the empire passed to his son, Selim II, who inherited a vast, powerful, and intricately administered state. Unlike his father, Selim II was far less inclined toward direct governance. Political authority increasingly rested in the hands of the Grand Vizier, most notably Mehmed II, while palace affairs and court decisions were influenced by the women of the harem, including Selim's influential wife. This shift marked the beginning of a pattern in which the Sultanate's ceremonial prestige outpaced the personal involvement of the ruler in day-to-day governance. Though Selim II would not emulate the military brilliance of his predecessors, the foundations laid by Suleiman ensured the continued stability, prosperity, and influence of the Ottoman Empire into the late 16th century. Although Selim II inherited the throne from his formidable father, his reign was distinguished less by military conquest and more by strategic diplomacy and consolidation. The Ottoman Empire, under his guidance, moved from war to peace in several previously contested regions. In 1568, a treaty was signed with Austria, establishing a period of non-aggression that mirrored earlier truces with the Safavids in the east. This diplomatic stability allowed Selim to focus on internal matters and the administration of newly acquired territories. A brief rebellion in Yemen soon tested his authority, but the uprising was swiftly suppressed, reaffirming Ottoman control over the southern provinces. The primary conflicts during Selim's reign erupted after the conquest of Cyprus from the Venetians in 1570, marking the expansion of Ottoman influence in the eastern Mediterranean. That same year, a peace treaty with Russia under Ivan the Terrible was formalized in Constantinople, highlighting the empire's growing diplomatic reach. Yet, tensions in Europe persisted. The Battle of Lepanto in 1571, though offering Venice only a temporary victory, underscored the continuing struggle for naval supremacy. By 1574, Ottoman control over Cyprus and Tunisia was secured, consolidating their Mediterranean holdings before Selim's death, passing the Sultanate to Murad III. Murad's reign, in stark contrast to his father, was marked by both expansion and internal decline. Early in his tenure, he captured Fez from the Portuguese in 1578 and expanded Ottoman influence in Persia, launching campaigns against Austria that extended into the following century. His reign also witnessed renewed hostilities with the Safavid dynasty, as intermittent clashes over Anatolian and Persian territories continued. Internal governance proved increasingly challenging. Continuous warfare placed immense financial strain on the empire, driving up taxes and fueling inflation. The reliability of the Janissary corps began to wane, and Murad, like Selim II, never personally led his troops into battle. Additionally, the Sultan's authority was increasingly influenced by the women of his harem and the Grand Vizier, reflecting the evolving dynamics of Ottoman court politics. Despite these challenges, Murad achieved notable diplomatic success. In 1581, he established a significant trade agreement with Queen Elizabeth I of England, recognizing common interests between the Islamic and Protestant worlds in opposition to Catholic hegemony. This agreement granted English merchants priority trade rights within Ottoman territory, a policy that would outlive Murad and endure under his successor, Mehmed III. As the final sultan of the 16th century, Mehmed III inherited the ongoing conflict with Austria and rebellious European vassals. Early in his reign, he faced setbacks, but he quickly rebounded, decisively defeating Habsburg and Transylvanian forces at the Battle of Carestes in 1596. By the close of the century, a tenuous peace was secured with regional challengers such as Michael the Brave, who had previously resisted Ottoman authority in Wallachia and Transylvania. The dawn of the 17th century found the Ottoman Empire under Mehmed III navigating a complex geopolitical landscape. The empire captured the fortress of Najikanitsa, successfully defending it the following year against combined Habsburg and Allied forces. Simultaneously, the Ottomans were embroiled in a 13-year war against the Habsburg monarchy while managing recurrent revolts along the empire's internal frontiers. In 1603, conflict erupted anew with the Safavid dynasty, further straining Ottoman resources. That December, the death of Mehmed III marked a critical transition. At just 13 years old, his son Ahmed I ascended to the throne. Due to his youth and the challenges of governance, Ahmed made the unprecedented decision to spare the life of his brother Mustafa, a choice reflecting a shift toward less fratricidal succession practices within the empire. Defying the brutal tradition of fratricide that had defined the succession of previous sultans, the young Ahmed I made the unprecedented decision to spare the life of his brother Mustafa. This act preserved the continuity of the dynasty, particularly important given that Ahmed had not yet fathered heirs. Immediately upon ascending the throne, Ahmed turned his attention to the ongoing Ottoman-Safavid conflict. In 1604, he dispatched a formidable army from Constantinople to confront the Safavid forces. However, delayed deployment and strategic missteps allowed the Safavids to capture Yerevan, undermining the Ottomans' initial advantage and wasting precious time in a war that would continue to strain the empire. By 1605, the conflict persisted, prompting the Ottomans, under the leadership of Grand Vizier Mehmed Pasha, to form a temporary alliance with Stephen Bocskai, the Prince of Transylvania, who had sought Ottoman assistance. Despite these efforts, revolts in Anatolia and pressure from multiple fronts forced Ahmed to concede in 1606, signing the Treaty of Sitfador with Austria. The treaty acknowledged the Habsburg Emperor as his equal, effectively halting further Ottoman expansion into Europe. Ahmed also extended commercial privileges to the Netherlands, France, and Venice, a move that, while diplomatically significant, inadvertently diminished the perceived strength and prestige of the Ottoman Empire. Later, in 1612, the Ottomans and Safavids signed the Treaty of Nasu Pasha, surrendering all territorial gains secured between 1578 and 1590, restoring borders to those established by the Peace of Amasya in 1555. Simultaneously, Ahmed renewed peaceful relations with France, Venice, and England, and established a new trade agreement with the Dutch Republic, further integrating the Ottoman Empire into the European and global commercial system. Domestically, Ahmed sought to strengthen his rule through administrative reforms, religious endowments, and ambitious architectural projects. Yet, despite these efforts, his reign remained overshadowed by external conflicts and internal instability. Ahmed I passed away in November 1617, leaving the empire fragile and politically unsettled. His death created an unusual situation. Multiple claimants to the throne resided within the palace. Due to his young age, Ahmed's son was bypassed, and the court faction favored Mustafa I, enthroning him as sultan. Mustafa I's reign proved troubled. Widely described as mentally unstable, he was heavily influenced by his mother, Halimi Sultan, who wielded substantial authority in his stead. His inability to stabilize the empire led to his eventual removal by another court faction, which installed his nephew, Osman II, as sultan in 1618 at the tender age of 14. Osman II immediately recognized the critical need to restore the empire's prestige. He began by signing the Treaty of Sarav with the Safavids, before personally leading an incursion into Poland, which had been interfering with Ottoman vassals during the Wallachian conflicts. Despite an Ottoman defeat at the Battle of Chosim in 1621, Osman remained resolute in his efforts to reform and strengthen the army. Frustrated with the perceived inefficiency of the Janissary Corps, Osman attempted to implement strict reforms, closing their coffee houses and cutting their pay. However, before he could fully reorganize the military, the Janissaries revolted. Osman II was dethroned, imprisoned, and ultimately strangled, marking the first time a sultan was assassinated by his own elite troops. In the wake of Osman's death, Mustafa I regained the throne in 1622, immediately cracking down on all those implicated in the assassination while attempting to reassert control over an empire beset by rebellion, unrest, and external threats. Unable to maintain control amid rising tensions between the Janissaries and Sipahi cavalry, as well as a revolt led by the Governor-General of Erzurum seeking revenge for Osman II, Mustafa I proved incapable of stabilizing the empire. Even his mother, Halime Sultan, eventually supported his removal, stipulating that her son should not be killed. In September 1623, the throne passed to Ahmed I's 11-year-old son, Murad IV. Initially, his early years were dominated by his mother and the Grand Viziers. But Murad would later emerge as a formidable force, demonstrating ruthless determination both in restoring internal order and in confronting foreign threats. Known for his brutal enforcement of authority and occasional disregard for Sharia law, Murad quickly refocused the empire's attention on the ongoing conflict with the Safavids. Through a series of campaigns, Murad IV successfully captured Azerbaijan, Tabriz, Hamadan, and even Baghdad in 1638, culminating in the signing of the Treaty of Zuhab in 1639, which established long-lasting borders between the Ottoman and Safavid empires. During this campaign, Murad IV also hosted ambassadors from the Mughal Empire, exchanging gifts and sending Ottoman troops to accompany the Mughals on their expedition to Sirat. Ironically, despite his strict bans on alcohol, tobacco, and coffee, Murad ultimately succumbed to alcohol addiction. Upon his death in 1640, his brother Ibrahim I ascended the throne. Ibrahim I's rule contrasted sharply with that of Murad IV. A lover of extravagance, Ibrahim's lavish lifestyle led to increased taxation, fueling resentment across the empire. By 1645, he had sparked a war with Venice over the island of Crete, exacerbating internal dissent. Economic difficulties persisted despite reforms from Grand Vizier Köprülü Mustafa Pasha, who had attempted to stabilize finances before his execution in 1644. Ibrahim's unpopular decisions and excessive spending ultimately led to a Janissary-led rebellion, resulting in his assassination. The throne then passed to his 6-year-old son, Mehmed IV, marking the beginning of one of the empire's longest reigns. Under Mehmed IV, the Ottoman Empire initially experienced a period of recovery and territorial expansion. The empire achieved successful campaigns against Venice, Transylvania, Poland, and Russia, briefly restoring Ottoman influence in Europe. However, this resurgence was dramatically halted at the Battle of Vienna in 1683, where Ottoman forces faced a devastating defeat against Polish-Lithuanian troops and their allies. This battle marked the onset of the Great Turkish War against the Holy League. Subsequent years brought further setbacks. The Second Battle of Mohawks resulted in a crushing defeat, compounded by internal mutinies. In November 1687, Mehmed IV was deposed and replaced by his brother Suleiman II, amidst ongoing unrest. Despite losing support from the Cretan vassals who had to defend themselves against a Russian invasion, the Ottomans achieved temporary victories, recapturing Belgrade and Niš in 1690. Although Emperor Leopold I of the Habsburgs refused to aid them in 1688, the Ottomans successfully repelled Austrian advances in Serbia and quelled revolts in Macedonia and Bulgaria. The empire's fortunes continued to fluctuate even after the death of Mehmed IV in 1691, coinciding with the loss of the influential Grand Vizier Köprülü Fazıl Mustafa Pasha at the Battle of Slankamen against the Austrians. Before his death, the Grand Vizier had implemented significant tax reforms and improved the treatment of Christians under Ottoman rule. Suleiman II now assumed the Sultanate, immediately facing major territorial losses to Austrian and Venetian forces at the outset of his reign. The empire, though resilient, was entering a period of protracted warfare, territorial retrenchment, and internal political instability, which would characterize much of the late 17th century. Over the subsequent years, Sultan Ahmed II was never able to exercise full independence in his command. He remained heavily reliant on his advisors while navigating the ongoing conflicts with the Holy League and addressing unrest in the provinces of the Levant. His reign, though marked by brief engagements, was largely overshadowed by the broader crises of the late 17th century. Ahmed II passed away in 1695 at the age of 51, leaving the throne to Mustafa II, son of Mehmed IV, who was now tasked with steering the empire through the concluding years of the Great Turkish War. Mustafa II's tenure was defined by both victories and setbacks, ultimately culminating in the signing of two pivotal treaties. The Treaty of Karlowitz in 1699 drastically curtailed Ottoman influence in the Balkans, transferring significant power in the region to Austria. The following year, the Treaty of Constantinople with Russia confirmed Russia's capture of Azov and brought a temporary cessation to hostilities between the two powers. With these agreements in place, Mustafa II remained Sultan for the next 3 years. The 17th century had been tumultuous for the Ottoman Empire. Whereas earlier centuries were characterized by expansion and conquest, this period exposed the empire's vulnerabilities: political instability, internal revolts, and repeated military defeats necessitated a shift in focus. By the dawn of the 18th century, the Ottomans had transitioned from aggressive territorial expansion to prioritizing the defense of existing borders, navigating complex relations with European powers, particularly Russia, while also addressing internal reforms and consolidations. To begin the 18th century, Mustafa II signed the Treaty of Constantinople on the 13th of July, 1700, formally ending the Russo-Turkish fight of 1,686 against Peter the Great. The treaty ceded Azov to Russia but promised 3 decades of peace between the empires. However, Mustafa was unable to enjoy prolonged stability. In 1703, the Edirne event erupted due to the discontent of the Janissary Corps, who resented Mustafa's decision to reside in Edirne instead of Constantinople after concluding treaties with the Holy League. The Sultan had delegated much of his political and administrative authority to Fez Zala Effendi, whom the Janissaries perceived as corrupt and overbearing. In the wake of this upheaval, Ahmed III, brother of Mustafa II, ascended to the Ottoman throne. His early reign was dominated by efforts to stabilize the empire, particularly the rebellious troops. With Constantinople gradually restored to a semblance of order under the new Grand Vizier, Alip Pasha, Ahmed III was able to turn his attention toward foreign diplomacy. He strengthened relations with England and France while forging an alliance with Charles XII of Sweden. Following Sweden's defeat by Peter the Great at the Battle of Poltava in 1709, Charles XII sought refuge at the Ottoman court and persuaded Ahmed III to declare war on Russia despite the 1700 Treaty of Constantinople. Leading Ottoman forces, Grand Vizier Mehmed Pasha orchestrated a decisive victory against Peter the Great's army at the Prut River, compelling Russia to cede Azov, dismantle its fortifications, and refrain from interference in Polish or Kazakh affairs. With Russia temporarily neutralized, Ahmed III shifted focus to Venice, declaring war in December of 1714. Utilizing coordinated land and naval operations, the Ottomans successfully captured the strategically vital region of Morea, further consolidating their position in the eastern Mediterranean. The period marked a transition in Ottoman strategy. While earlier centuries emphasized unchecked expansion, the early 18th century reflected a more cautious, calculated approach, balancing diplomacy, military action, and internal consolidation to preserve the empire's enduring power. The following year, news of the Ottoman victory reached Austria, prompting Emperor Charles VI to intervene and ignite the Austro-Turkish War of 1716-1718. Prince Eugene, the Habsburg general, achieved considerable success against the Ottomans, though the war disrupted Dutch and British trade throughout the Mediterranean. In 1718, under pressure from Great Britain and Holland, the Ottomans, Venetians, and Austrians signed the Treaty of Passarowitz, ending the conflict. The treaty confirmed Ottoman control over Morea, but required Ahmed III to cede Belgrade, Little Wallachia, and Banat to Austria, hindering the empire's westward expansion. In June 1724, the Russo-Ottoman Treaty aimed to partition Safavid Iran between the two empires. However, Ottoman influence in the region dwindled by 1730, likely contributing to frustration over the Sultan's lavish lifestyle during economic hardships. Discontent among the Janissaries culminated in a rebellion led by Patrona Halil, resulting in the deposition of Ahmed III and the ascension of his nephew, Mahmud I. Mahmud faced immediate challenges. He quelled the rebellion by executing Halil and his supporters and managed ongoing conflicts with Persia while contending with renewed European tensions beginning in 1735. The Russo-Turkish War erupted after Russia signed the Treaty of Ganja with Iran, forming an alliance against the Ottomans. Russian forces advanced into Crimea, burning fortifications and eventually capturing the fortress of Azov. Although the campaign was aggressive, a plague outbreak between 1737 and 1739 restrained full-scale operations. Austria attempted to join the conflict in 1737, but suffered repeated defeats and eventually lost Belgrade in 1739. Despite ongoing negotiations, the warring parties initially made little diplomatic progress. By 1739, the Treaty of Belgrade ended the Austro-Turkish War, granting the Ottomans control over the Kingdom of Serbia, parts of Banat, and Altynea, which was handed to the Ottoman vassal of Wallachia. Russia signed the Treaty of Niš a month later, concluding their conflict while retaining control of Azov. 6 years after these peace agreements, Sultan Mehmed I died of natural causes, and Osman III, son of Mustafa II, ascended the throne. Having spent 51 years in confinement following his father's deposition, Osman III exhibited behavioral peculiarities, likely shaped by his prolonged captivity. His reign saw few significant changes, though he notably banned music and musicians from his palace. A more consequential act was the issuance of a firman in 1757, which formalized the division of responsibilities for holy sites among Christians, Jews, and Muslims. Later that year, on October 30, Osman III passed away, and Mustafa III took the throne. Mustafa III focused on strengthening the empire's internal administration, addressing issues related to coinage, aqueducts, and law enforcement. He also traveled extensively to ensure his policies were implemented throughout the Ottoman territories, emphasizing consolidation and stability after decades of military conflicts and political upheaval. Externally, Mustafa III sought to maintain peace with European powers. Despite pressure from Frederick the Great of Prussia to engage more actively in continental affairs, the Ottomans prioritized stability until conflict with Russia became unavoidable. Russian interference in Poland and Crimea escalated tensions, triggering the Russo-Turkish War of 1768–1774. The war ended unfavorably for the Ottomans, who were compelled to cede territory, pay reparations, and grant Russia the role of protector of Orthodox Christians in the Ottoman vassal states of Wallachia and Moldavia. Although the Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca was signed in July 1774, Mustafa III had already died of a heart attack in January, leaving the treaty's implementation to his successor, Abdul Hamid I. Sultan Abdul Hamid I prioritized reforms of the Janissary Corps and the broader Ottoman military and founded the Imperial Naval Engineering School. He also focused on consolidating Ottoman control over Syria, Egypt, and Iraq. While initially reluctant to confront Russia, ongoing abuses of power by the Russians as protectors of Orthodox Christians forced Hamid into war once again in 1787. Initially holding their ground, Ottoman forces struggled when Austria joined the conflict, and the prolonged war took a toll on the Sultan, who died in April 1789. Succeeding him, Selim III assumed the throne amid continuing conflict with Russia. Early in his reign, he accepted a settlement that confirmed Russian success, but allowed him to focus on internal reform. Selim established a committee of reformers, implemented measures relating to taxation, land tenure, and provincial governance, and continued military reforms begun by his predecessor. Additionally, he opened Ottoman embassies in European capitals to strengthen diplomatic relations with the West. Toward the end of the century, Napoleon's invasion of Egypt forced Selim to declare war on France while forming an alliance with Great Britain and Russia. Although Napoleon initially styled himself as a liberator of Egypt, internal turmoil in France forced a temporary retreat. By 1801, the French formally withdrew, providing Selim a reprieve, though he maintained a cautious respect for Napoleon. Correspondence from the French leader addressed Selim as the most high and invincible prince, the great emperor of the Muslims, urging him to reject Russian influence and acknowledge Napoleon's imperial status. This episode foreshadowed the diplomatic complexities and military challenges the Ottoman Empire would face in the 19th century, marking a period of defensive strategy, fragile alliances, and mounting decline. Selim III had genuinely wished to favor Napoleon, but he was intimidated by the combined military strength of Russia and Britain, forcing the Ottomans to maintain a defensive alliance with Russia until 1806. That year, war reignited between the empires when Russia objected to Selim's deposition of his vassal governors in Wallachia and Moldavia. Internally, Selim faced revolts from Janissary and Yamak troops due to his reformist policies, ultimately leading to his ousting and imprisonment in 1807. Mustafa IV succeeded him, and although reformist supporters attempted to reinstate Selim, Mustafa ordered his assassination before any action could be taken. Mustafa's reign was brief, as Selim III's brother, Mehmed II, quickly deposed him in July 1808 and ascended the throne. Mehmed II aimed to continue Selim's westernization reforms, but had to contend with immediate crises. The war with Russia concluded only in 1812 with the Treaty of Bucharest, forcing the Ottomans to cede Bessarabia to Russia after demoralizing losses. The Balkans became increasingly unstable. Serbian demands for autonomy escalated in 1815, and the Greeks began moving toward independence, culminating in the Greek revolt in the Morea in 1821. Ottoman control was temporarily restored with help from the governor of Egypt, but an alliance of Britain, France, and Russia decisively defeated the Ottoman Egyptian forces at the Battle of Navarino in 1827. Mahmud II responded by declaring war on Russia, leading to the Russo-Turkish War of 1828-1829. The conflict ended with the recognition of Greek independence in 1830. In 1831, Muhammad Ali Pasha of Egypt challenged Mahmud over an unfulfilled promise, granting him governorship of Syria and Tarsus. Ali's son Ibrahim Pasha led troops to seize Damascus, Aleppo, and other territories, marching toward Constantinople. Having previously abolished the Janissary Corps in 1826, Mahmud now sought foreign assistance. Britain declined to help due to French support of Egypt, but Russia agreed to an alliance. Despite these measures, the Egyptians routed Ottoman forces at Nisibin in June 1839. During this tumultuous period, Mahmud II began the Tanzimat reform era, introducing European-inspired modernization in administration, military, and civil law. Unfortunately, he died of tuberculosis that same summer, and Abdul-Mahid I ascended the throne, continuing the reformist trajectory. In 1840, the Oriental Crisis erupted during the ongoing Egyptian-Ottoman conflict. The entirety of the Ottoman navy defected to Muhammad Ali's side. France initially supported the Egyptians, but Britain, Russia, Austria, and Prussia intervened to support the Ottoman Sultan. The Convention of London in July 1840 aimed to return Egyptian-controlled territories, including Sudan and Egypt, nominally to Ottoman control. Muhammad Ali hesitated, sought French support, and in October 1840, the European powers launched coordinated military action to enforce the settlement. Muhammad Ali and Ottoman consolidation. Early 1850 seconds. November. Muhammad Ali agreed to Ottoman terms, surrendering Syria, Adana, Crete, Hijaz, and the Holy Land. Ottoman naval forces returned to Sultan Abdülmecid. 1853. Ottoman Empire entered the Crimean War against Russia. Cause: Russia acting as protector of Orthodox Christians in Ottoman vassals. Allies: Britain and France supported Ottomans. Austria initially aligned with Russia, later threatened to switch sides. Outcome: Treaty of Paris, the 30th of March, 1856. Peace imposed on Russia. Reforms under Abdülmecid and Abdul Aziz. Hati Humayun, equal treatment for all classes and ethnicities within the empire. 1861. Abdülmecid died. Abdul Aziz became sultan. Continued westernization and reforms. Council of State Establishment. French advice. Public education system. First civil code of the Ottoman Empire. Russo-Turkish War. Balkan decline. 1877-1879 Cause: Russian support for Balkan rebellions. Coalition led by Russia. Romanian, Bulgarian, Serbian, Montenegrin troops. Ottoman defeat led to independence of Romania, Serbia, Montenegro. Creation of Principality of Bulgaria. Austria-Hungary occupation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. British control over Cyprus. Congress of Berlin, 1878, confirmed outcomes. Note: Abdul Aziz dethroned by ministers prior to war. Abdul Hamid II became sultan. Sultan, reform. Late 19th century. Murad V, brief reign of 93 days. Deposed due to mental health concerns. Abdul Hamid II. Promulgated the first Ottoman constitution, 1876, lasted 2 years. Focus on defense and internal stability amidst European pressure. External affairs. France expanded into Tunisia. Britain took control of Egypt, 1882. Ottomans sought alliance with Germany. Greco-Turkish War, 1897. Cause: conflict over Crete's sovereignty. Ottoman Empire versus Greece. Ottomans backed by Germany, Austria, Hungary, France, Italy, Russia, Britain. Outcome: short war. Greece defeated, paid reparations. Crete remained autonomous under Ottoman suzerainty. End of the 19th century. Internal unrest persisted in the Balkans and Armenia. Ottoman Empire increasingly defensive, losing territory and struggling to maintain authority. By the 1892, empire focused more on defense and stability than expansion. Young Turk Revolution, 1908, 1909. Background. Reformist groups, Young Turks, Committee of Union and Progress, CUP, wanted to restore the constitutional monarchy abolished by Abdul Hamid II in 1878. Motivation. Preserve the empire amid increasing European pressures. Fears of partition, Anglo-Russian Convention of 1907 affecting Macedonia. Revolution, July 1908. Led by Major Ahmed Niazi, Ab Sabri, Ismail Enver. Sultan Abdul Hamid II forced to restore the constitution. General elections held in November 1908. CUP gained major success. New political parties, Freedom and Accord Party, Ottoman Socialist Party. Sultan Abdul Hamid II. Maintained symbolic title, but power largely ceremonial. Counter-coup and deposition, 1909. Abdul Hamid II attempted to restore autocratic power with promises to reinstate Sharia law and caliphate powers. Coup quickly quelled, Sultan deposed. Mehmed II installed as a symbolic figurehead. Balkan tensions, wars, dissatisfaction. Christians in Macedonia, Serbs, Bulgarians, Greeks, Albanians, frustrated with Ottoman centralization. First Balkan War, 1912 to 1912. Declared by Montenegro, the 8th of October 1912, against Ottomans. Balkan League, Serbia, Bulgaria, Montenegro, Greece. Russian support favored Balkan League. Ottoman forces heavily defeated. Balkan League captured Macedonia. Italo-Turkish War, 1911, 1912. Italy demanded North African Ottoman territories. Ottoman refusal led to war. Outcome. Italy captured Libya and the Dodecanese Islands. Further loss of Ottoman African holdings. Violence erupted as law and order collapsed across the empire, and the Western Allies marched into Constantinople, claiming a mission to restore harmony in Anatolia. The Armistice of Mudros had granted them the right to intervene if they deemed it necessary. For the weakened Ottoman authorities, resistance was nearly impossible. The occupation of Constantinople continued until the Treaty of Sèvres was signed on August 10, 1920. This treaty handed control of Ottoman finances to European powers, restricted the empire's military, and carved its territory among Greece, Armenia, France, Italy, and Britain. But the treaty would never be ratified, as a surge of Turkish nationalism rose from the heart of Anatolia. The Turkish War of Independence began. The Grand National Assembly emerged as the rallying point for nationalists, fighting not only the Western Allies but also the remnants of the Sultan's forces. Backed indirectly by a distracted and unstable Russia, the Turkish revolutionaries pressed forward, culminating in a series of peace talks that would seal the fate of the Ottoman Empire. On November 17, 1922, Sultan Mehmed VI left for exile, marking the official end of one of the world's longest-lasting and most powerful empires. Under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal, Turkey reclaimed its territories in Anatolia and established a sovereign, independent nation. The Treaty of Lausanne in the summer of 1923 cemented the Republic of Turkey, finally replacing the Ottoman Empire.